The door creaked open, and Aunt May held out a small package wrapped in brown paper that crinkled like dry leaves. From a stranger at the door, she muttered, her eyes narrowing. "Said it was for you. Be careful with it." Evie unwrapped it slowly, her breath catching as a snow globe emerged its glass dome, capturing a miniature winter scene, a tiny German shepherd standing sentinel amid swirling flakes, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. She shook it gently, watching the snow dance like trapped dreams, a flicker of wonder piercing her solitude. The old family estate loomed on the outskirts of the snow-draped rural town, its gabled roof sagging under the weight of winter, like a weary sentinel guarding secrets long buried. Chimneys puffed thin smoke into the biting air, mingling with the scent of pine and frozen earth, while bare trees clawed at the gray sky, their branches etched like veins against the fading light. Inside the attic felt like a forgotten chamber, walls lined with boxes of yellowed photographs and moth-eaten quilts, the floorboards groaning underfoot as if whispering warnings. Evie placed the snow globe on her nightstand, its base cold against the scarred wood, and the tiny dog inside seemed to shift ever so slightly, as if straining against the glass confines. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the eaves like a distant lament, rattling the window latches and sending shivers across her skin. Aunt May paced downstairs, her footsteps a rhythmic thud that echoed Evie's unease. She had dismissed the stranger as a drifter, but her voice carried a thread of doubt. As night deepened, the snow thickened, blanketing the town in an oppressive silence broken only by the occasional creak of settling ice. Then a faint scratch at the window, subtle like nails on glass, drew Evie's gaze. Her heart stuttered. Was it the wind or something more? The snow globe began to glow faintly, an ethereal blue light pulsing like a heartbeat, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the growing storm within her. What if it's not just a gift? She thought, a chill unrelated to the cold seeping into her bones as the miniature dog's eyes appeared to lock onto hers, hinting at perils yet unseen. Evie clutched the snow globe tighter, its cool glass pressing into her palms like a fragile barrier against the storm raging inside her. The tiny dog inside stared back, unblinking, its posture rigid as if frozen in eternal vigilance. And for a moment she envied its stillness, trapped but untouched by the world's cruelties. Mom would have loved this. She thought, the words slicing through her like shards of ice, unbidden and sharp. Her mother's face flickered in her mind, warm smiles during storytime, hands braiding her hair, now reduced to faded photos tucked away in drawers she dared not open. The grief sat heavy in her chest, not as tears she hadn't cried in months, as if her eyes had turned to frost, but as a numb paralysis, her small body curling inward on the bed, knees drawn to her chin. Downstairs, Aunt May's voice droned on the phone, a distant murmur about groceries or bills, oblivious to the void upstairs. Evie traced the dome's curve with a trembling finger, whispering, "Why did you leave me? What am I supposed to do now?" The questions hung in the air unanswered, her breath fogging the glass like a veil over secrets. She rocked slightly, the motion subtle, a defense against the emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. The snow globe's glow intensified faintly, as if responding to her silent plea, but it only deepened the ache, reminding her how alone she truly was, her imagination, the only spark in a world gone cold and gray. No sobs escaped, just a quiet unraveling, her gaze fixed on the miniature shepherd, wishing it could bark back, could chase away the shadows creeping in her heart. As the whispers of her despair faded into the attic's hush, a soft thump echoed from the window, pulling Evie's gaze upward. There, framed by the frost-etched pane like a portrait from another world, stood a real German shepherd, its silvery fur dusted with snowflakes that glittered under the moon's pale gaze. Its eyes, deep ancient pools reflecting the snow globe's eerie glow, locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver racing down her spine, not of fear, but of recognition. "It's you." She thought, her heart stuttering in her chest, the numbness cracking just enough for a spark of wonder to ignite. The dog didn't bark or whine. It simply watched, its breath fogging the glass in rhythmic clouds, a silent sentinel mirroring the tiny figure in her hands. Evie froze, her hand hovering mid-air as if reaching out might shatter the illusion. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the trees, carrying hints of pine and distant thunder, while Aunt May's footsteps paused below, sensing nothing. The shepherd tilted its head slightly, a gesture laden with unspoken promise, as if saying, "I've been waiting." In that suspended moment, the snow globe warmed in her grasp, its flakes swirling faster, and Evie felt the first pull of something inevitable, a thread connecting her fractured world to mysteries buried in the snow. The memories came in fragments like shards of a broken mirror reflecting a life that once shimmered with light. Evie, barely 6, then remembered her mother's laughter echoing through the old estate's sun-dappled kitchen, where flour-dusted counters bore witness to impromptu baking sessions, cookies shaped like stars, their edges crisp and golden-scented with vanilla and warmth. Her mother, with hair like spun sunlight and eyes that held the sparkle of untold stories, would spin tales of magical guardians' dogs that roamed between worlds, protecting the innocent from shadows that lurked in the corners of dreams. Days blurred into one another like snowflakes melting on a warm pane, indistinguishable and fleeting. Evie rose with the pale dawn filtering through the attic's cracked window, the light casting long shadows that danced mockingly across the floorboards, worn smooth by generations of footsteps now silent. Breakfast was a mechanical affair, Aunt May setting out bowls of oatmeal in the kitchen below, the steam rising in lazy curls, scented with cinnamon, but tasting like ash on Evie's tongue. "Eat up, child," Aunt May would say, her voice a weary thread, eyes avoiding the empty chair where her sister once sat. School followed a trudging walk through the snow-dusted paths of the rural town, boots crunching over frozen ground that mirrored the ice encasing her heart. In class, Evie stared at the blackboard numbers and letters swimming before her eyes, her mind wandering to imagined realms where mothers didn't vanish like mist. Ghost lingered in the shadows beyond the estate's frost-kissed fence, his silvery fur blending with the moonlit snow like a specter woven from winter's breath. His eyes, deep amber flecked with ancient gold, held the weight of centuries, reflecting not just the present chill, but echoes of battles long faded into legend. Scars etched his hide pale lines, snaking across his flanks like cracks in old porcelain, remnants of fangs and flames that had sought to claim him. He moved with a deliberate grace, paused, leaving faint imprints that melted away too quickly, as if the earth itself forgot his passage. Betrayal had forged him once, a pup in a forgotten era, bound by a whispered incantation to a lineage of guardians, his loyalty twisted into an eternal curse. In the quiet interstices of the estate, Evie and Ghost orbited each other like twin stars caught in a gravitational pull, their emptiness reflecting back in silent waves. Evie, from her attic perch, would gaze out at the shadowy form beyond the window, her fingers absently tracing the snow globe's dome. Feeling the cold glass echo the void in her chest, a hollow where her mother's laughter once resided, now filled with whispers of what-ifs. "He's alone too," she mused inwardly, her eyes tracing Ghost's solitary silhouette against the snow, his posture a statue of guarded solitude that mirrored her own curled form under the blankets. Ghost in turn pressed his nose to the frost-laced pane from afar, his ancient eyes catching the flicker of the snow globe's light, sensing the girl's pain as a familiar ache like the scars that mapped his hide invisible wounds, that throbbed in tandem with her unspoken grief. The blizzard descended like a vengeful spirit, swallowing the rural town in a maelstrom of white fury winds, howling through the estate's eaves like mournful wails from forgotten graves. Snow lashed against the attic window, each flake a needle pricking the glass, while the air grew thick with the metallic tang of impending storm. Evie huddled under her blankets, the snow globe clutched in her hands, when suddenly it pulsed with an unnatural light blue veins of luminescence threading through the dome, illuminating a vision within a shadowy figure prowling the edges of the estate, cloaked in darkness that twisted like smoke. Her breath caught heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, as the tiny shepherd inside barked silently, its form blurring in frantic motion. Then came the scratch, insistent clawing at the window pane, cutting through the gale's roar. Evie's hand trembled on the window latch, the metal icy against her skin like a warning etched in frost. Inside her mind, a storm raged fiercer than the one outside. What if it's a trick the stranger, the Snowglobe? It's all too strange. Logic whispered, echoing Aunt May's stern lectures about locked doors and wandering alone in the night, her voice a phantom tether pulling her back to safety. Fear coiled in her chest, visions of the shadowy figure from the Snowglobe flashing like lightning dark tendrils, reaching promising perils she couldn't name, her mother's absence, a gaping wound that screamed caution. Yet compassion flickered a warm ember against the cold ghost's eyes, pleading through the glass, his whine a soft heart-wrenching keen that pierced the wind's howl, reminding her of her own loneliness, the way he mirrored her grief in silent vigil. He needs me like I need answers. Empathy urged the Snowglobe's glow warming in her pocket, tipping the scales as Ghost's paw scraped once more, a gesture laden with trust. Her breath fogged the pain, blurring the line between fear and fate. Logic battled the pull of her heart, but the dog's quiet desperation won her fingers, finally twisting the latch with a click that echoed like destiny unlocking. The window swung open with a protesting creak, admitting a blast of frigid air that clawed at Evie's cheeks like invisible talons, snowflakes swirling in like frantic moths drawn to the attic's dim light. She hesitated only a heartbeat longer before bundling into her coat, the fabric stiff with cold, and slipping out onto the roof's slick shingles, her boots scraping unevenly as she descended the trellis that groaned under her weight. Ghost waited below his silvery form, a beacon in the blizzard's haze, eyes locked on her with unwavering intensity. He turned and bounded ahead, paws sinking into drifts that exploded in powdery bursts, his path a winding trail through the estate's overgrown yard. Evie followed her steps, messy and faltering boots slipping on hidden ice hands numb as she clutched the Snowglobe in her pocket, its warmth a pulsing anchor against the chaos. The storm roared around them, winds whipping her hair like wild spirits, the scent of wet earth and pine sharp in her nostrils, while Ghost's steady pace cut through the whiteout, glancing back with encouraging whines that pierced the gale. "I'm coming," she whispered inwardly, her breath visible plumes, the act irreversible. Now a leap into the unknown propelled by the Snowglobe's visions and Ghost's urgent lead. Branches snapped underfoot like brittle bones. The rural town's lights faint ghosts in the distance, but Evie pressed on her commitment, solidifying with each labored step, the mess of snow clinging to her like doubts she shook off. Ghost led her to the estate's dilapidated barn, its weathered doors ajar like gaping mouths in the storm. Creaking invitations into the dim interior, where hay bales loomed like forgotten sentinels, scented with musty decay and faint animal warmth. Evie stumbled inside, shaking snow from her shoulders, her eyes adjusting to the shadows pierced by the Snowglobe's ethereal glow, revealing ancient carvings on the walls, silhouettes of shepherds like Ghost, etched with symbols that hummed with latent magic. Ghost circled restlessly, his fur matted with ice, a low whine escaping as he nudged a hidden panel, revealing a compartment with faded letters and a locket that mirrored the Snowglobe's design. The barn's interior loomed like a cavern of forgotten whispers, hay-strewn floors crunching softly under Evie's tentative steps, the air thick with the earthy musk of aged wood and lingering storm. Lantern light flickered from a hook overhead, casting elongated shadows that danced like hesitant spirits across the walls, etched with cryptic carvings. Ghost retreated to a far corner, his silvery fur bristling slightly, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Not aggressive, but a barrier woven from centuries of caution, his eyes gleaming with guarded wariness as he curled into a tight ball on a pile of old sacks. As dawn's tentative light filtered through the barn's slatted walls, painting stripes of gold across the dust-moted air, Evie unpacked a small bundle from her pocket, a crust of bread and a sliver of cheese remnants from dinner, their scents mingling with the hay's sweet decay. She placed them on the floor midway between them, not advancing, her eyes averted, in quiet offering the act a bridge over their shared chasm of pain. Ghost watched from his corner, ears perked, nostrils flaring at the familiar aroma, his body tense as coiled spring instincts warring with curiosity. "He sees me, really sees," Evie pondered inwardly, her thoughts drifting to her mother's empty chair at the table, the way grief had carved hollows in her soul, much like the scars she glimpsed on Ghost's flank when he shifted. The snow globe rested beside her, its dome cracked faintly from the storm, symbolic of their fragile states, glowing softly, as if echoing their unspoken wounds. Sunlight pierced the barn's cracks like golden lances, banishing the night's shadows and illuminating moats that danced like fireflies in the warming air, scented now with fresh hay and the faint ozone of receded storm. Evie, emboldened by the flashback's revelations, rummaged in a corner and unearthed an old stick, gnarled and weathered like a relic from her mother's tales, holding it aloft with a tentative smile. "Fetch," she whispered, her voice a fragile melody, tossing it gently across the floor where it skittered with a wooden clatter. Ghost's ears perked, his head tilting in curiosity, body uncoiling from its guarded stance, as instincts stirred play, long dormant, flickering to life. He bounded after it, paws thumping softly, jaws snapping the stick midair with a playful crunch, tail wagging in hesitant arcs that swept straw like a broom. Evie giggled, the sound bubbling up unexpected, light and foreign after months of silence, her chest expanding with a warmth that melted the frost around her heart. "It's like Mom's stories coming alive," she thought, clapping her hands as Ghost returned, dropping the stick at her feet with a proud huff, his eyes sparkling with a joy mirroring her own. They continued the game, evolving, Evie feinting throws, Ghost leaping in feigned surprise, their movements a synchronized dance that filled the barn with energy. The barn's atmosphere shifted as twilight draped its velvet cloak over the rural town, the fading light filtering through cracks in the walls like whispered secrets, casting a soft amber glow that mingled with the snow globe's persistent luminescence. Evie sat against a hay bale, knees drawn up, her fingers idly sketching patterns in the straw-dusted floor, the air heavy with the scent of damp wood and lingering warmth from their earlier play. Ghost paced the perimeter, his silvery fur catching the dim rays, each step a measured cadence that spoke of internal battles, centuries of solitude clashing with the pull of connection. "He's coming closer." Evie thought, her heart a fluttering bird in her chest. Memories of her mother's stories flooding back, guardians who chose their wards, bonds forged in moments of surrender. The snow globe propped beside her swirled with visions of past alliances, Ghost with her ancestors leaning into touches that healed old wounds. But now in the present, he paused, eyes locking onto hers with a depth that pierced the veil of her grief. Slowly, deliberately, Ghost approached his pause, silent as falling snowtail low, but not tucked, a sign of cautious vulnerability. Evie's breath hitched. She extended a hand, palm up, not demanding, but inviting her internal monologue a whirlwind. "Please don't run. I need this too." He hesitated inches away, nostrils flaring at her scent, lavender and salt from unshed tears. Then in a moment that felt like the world tilting, he pressed his muzzle into her palm, rough tongue flicking out in a tentative lick. Night cloaked the estate in velvet darkness, the snow outside falling in relentless sheets that muffled the world like a shroud, the air crisp with the bite of frost and distant wood smoke. Evie and Ghost shared the barn's warmth, her hand still resting on his fur, but a subtle shift rippled through the peace Ghost's ears, twitching first, then his body tensing like a bowstring drawn taut. He lifted his head, gaze fixed on the door, a low growl building in his throat, primal and instinctive, his nostrils flaring at some unseen scent carried on the wind. "What's wrong?" Evie wondered, her heart quickening, the snow globe in her pocket growing cold, its glow dimming as if sensing the encroaching unease. Ghost rose, posture alert, tail stiff, hackles rising slightly, pacing to the cracked window, his breath fogging the pain as he stared into the swirling white shadows dancing beyond like elusive phantoms. The environment transformed from sanctuary to sentinel post, the barn's creaks amplifying into ominous warnings, echoes of past traumas stirring in Ghost's ancient eyes. He barked sharply once, a sound that cut the silence like a knife, foreshadowing threats from the family's buried history, the tension coiling subtly and visibly as Evie felt the first chill of dread seep in. The barn's fragile peace shattered as the snow globe in Evie's pocket flared with a sudden ominous red hue, casting bloody shadows across the straw-strewn floor, the air thickening with an electric charge like the prelude to thunder. Ghost's growl escalated into a snarl, teeth bared in protective fury, his body positioning itself between Evie and the door hackles raised like silver spikes, eyes wild with recognition of a threat rooted deep in his scarred past. Evie scrambled to her feet, heart slamming against her ribs, pulling out the globe to witness the vision unfolding within a man gaunt and shadowed, the same who had haunted her mother's flashbacks, his hands outstretched in greedy pursuit flames licking at the edges, as if recalling a long-ago fire where Ghost had been chained and whipped, his howls echoing in betrayal. No, not him, Evie thought, panic flooding her like icy water memories crashing in waves, her mother's bedtime warnings of a bad man who coveted the family's magic, the one who had driven her mother to hide the Snowglobe, his presence a specter that had indirectly led to her weakened state. Ghost lunged at the empty air, barking ferociously, his aggression, a maternal instinct reborn, protecting the lineage as he had Evie's ancestors. But terror laced his fury body, trembling with flashbacks of violence, lashes that split fur cages that confined his immortal form. The barn door creaked open with a groan that sliced through the tension, admitting a gust of snow-laden wind that whipped straw into frenzied whirlwinds, the figure in the threshold, materializing like a nightmare, given form the man from the visions, his coat tattered and eyes gleaming with manic hunger under the lantern's flicker. "I knew it," he rasped, voice gravelly as rusted chains stepping inside with boots thudding heavily on the floor, the scent of stale tobacco and desperation clinging to him like a shroud. Ghost's reaction was immediate, primal, a ferocious lunge forward, snarling with bared fangs that dripped with protective rage, recognizing the abuser who had once bound him in iron during a forgotten betrayal, his body a barrier of muscle and fury shielding Evie. The man halted, a twisted smile curling his lips. Ah, the eternal mutt. Still playing guard dog. His words laced with venom, hands clenching as if recalling the whips he'd wielded against Ghost in pursuit of the family's magic. Evie hid behind a bale, clutching the snow globe that pulsed erratically, her thoughts a storm of panic and determination. He's real, the bad man Mom warned about. The confrontation escalated, verbal barbs flying like arrows, the man demanding the snow globe. "It belongs to the family, to me. Your mother stole it from our line." His voice rising to a shout, revealing ties as the estranged uncle, envious of the guardian's bond, passed to her mother. Ghost circled growls, rumbling like thunder, snapping at the air, inches from the man's legs, the standoff physical in its intensity, the man feinting with a grabbed pitchfork, Ghost dodging with agile grace his scars, a map of past encounters with this very foe. The barn door slammed shut behind the retreating man, the sound echoing like a final gasp in the storm's lull, leaving the air thick with residual tension, scented with the acrid tang of fear and disturbed hay. Evie slumped against the wall, her legs buckling as adrenaline ebbed, leaving her trembling like a leaf caught in fading winds. The snow globe in her hand, dimming to a faint ember, its visions dissolving into swirling flakes that signaled a precarious reprieve. Ghost padded back to her side, his fur still bristled, but his growls silenced a whine escaping as he nudged her arm, his warm breath a grounding anchor against her clammy skin. He's gone, but not forever. Evie thought, regret coiling in her gut like twisted vines, the regret of secrets unearthed too soon, of a past that refused burial. She reached out her hand, finding his fur fingers burying deep into the silvery strands that felt like woven moonlight, drawing comfort from his steady presence. The snowstorm returned with vengeful fury, winds howling around the estate like tormented souls, piling drifts against the barn's walls that creaked in protest, the air heavy with the sharp bite of ice and impending doom. Evie stirred from uneasy sleep beside Ghost, her hands still tangled in his fur, when the snow globe in her pocket began to pulse erratically, its dome fogging as visions coalesced, the man stalking through the whiteout, his form a blurred shadow drawing nearer footprints, carving deliberate paths toward the barn. He's coming back. Evie thought, her pulse racing like a trapped animal, unease blooming in her chest as she peered through the slatted window, the rural town's light smothered by the blizzard's veil. Ghost sensed it first, his body tensing beneath her touch, a low growl vibrating through him like distant thunder. ears pricked and nostrils flaring at subtle scents carried on the gale stale tobacco malice, the faint crunch of boots on snow. He rose, pacing with watchful grace, tail stiff as a sentinel's flag, his ancient instincts humming with warnings from centuries of vigilance body language. A silent alarm hackles rising gaze, fixed on the door, as if piercing the storm's heart. Footprints appeared in the fresh powder near the estate's fence, barely visible, but unmistakable deep impressions that wound closer like veins threading toward a pulsing core, heightening the sense of being hunted. Evie's mind raced thoughts, fracturing like cracking ice. What does he want? The globe us. The barn transformed into a pressure cooker, every creak and gust amplifying the dread, Aunt May's silhouette flickering in the main house's window, unaware. Ghost nudged Evie toward the hidden panel, his whines urgent signals of danger weaving a tapestry of suspense, the storm's roar a cinematic backdrop to their growing watchfulness instincts clashing with the encroaching threat. The barn door burst open with a splintering crack, the storm's fury rushing in like an unleashed beast, snow swirling in chaotic eddies that stung like needles against exposed skin, the man emerging from the whiteout like a harbinger of doom, eyes wild and fixed on the snow globe in Evie's grasp. "No more games, girl!" he bellowed, voice cutting through the gale's roar, his form hulking in the threshold coat whipping like dark wings, the scent of desperation and old grudges thick in the air. Ghost reacted instantaneously, a blur of silver muscle launching forward, snarling with primal ferocity, colliding with the man in a tangle of limbs and fangs, the impact echoing like thunder as they rolled across the hay-strewn floor. Evie screamed, "Ghost!" her voice raw with terror, backing against the wall as the confrontation turned visceral, the man grappling for a hidden knife, its blade glinting coldly, slashing wildly, while Ghost dodged and snapped, blood welling from a shallow gash on his flank, his yelps piercing the chaos. The threat crystallized the man's obsession with the family's legacy, revealed in shouted accusations. "Your mother hid it from me, but it's mine by blood." His hands clawing toward Evie, forcing her to clutch the snow globe tighter, its visions fracturing into scenes of imminent loss, her mother's face pleading from the glass. In the heart of the maelstrom, time stretched like taut sinew, the barn a vortex of snow and strife, where Evie's world narrowed to the glint of the knife, arcing toward Ghost, her mind fracturing with visions from the snow globe, her mother's final stand. Ghost's eternal loyalty, a legacy demanding action. "I have to choose." She thought, the internal storm, peaking grief for her mother, transforming into fierce resolve, her small body surging forward in a decisive leap, throwing herself between the man and Ghost, a shard of the cracked snow globe clutched like a talisman in her fist. "Stop!" she cried, voice cracking, but unyielding, the shard's edge pressing against the man's arm as she shoved with all her might, her action a pivot from fear to commitment. The glass cutting shallowly into his skin, drawing a hiss of surprise. Ghost, wounded but undaunted, rallied at her side, his body shielding her flank, a low growl rumbling as he nipped at the man's heels, their mutual protection a synchronized dance. Evie's courage bolstering his strength, his presence amplifying her defiance. The man staggered, eyes widening in shock at the child's ferocity. You're just like her," he muttered, the knife clattering to the floor as Aunt May burst in, lantern swinging wildly, her voice a thunderclap. "Get away from them!" The revelation spilled, then Aunt May confessing the man's identity as her embittered brother exiled for his greed over the family's magical heirloom, his pursuit the shadow that had haunted their mother to her end. Evie's decision crystallized the resolution clutching Ghost's fur. She whispered, "We're family now." The words an emotional anchor tears mingling with snow as the man retreated into the storm, defeated by their unity. The barn settled winds, dying to whispers, the snow globe's glow steadying into peaceful swirls, transforming tension into cathartic release. Evie and Ghost collapsing together, breaths sinking in exhausted harmony, their bond irrevocable, a testament to chosen protection over inherited curse. The barn exhaled into stillness as the storm's last whispers faded, the air heavy with the scent of wet wood and lingering blood snowflakes, drifting lazily through the open door like reluctant farewells. Evie lay slumped against Ghost, her small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythms, exhaustion etching lines on her young face that seemed too deep for her years. Aunt May knelt beside them, her hands usually brisk and efficient, now gentle, as she pressed a clean cloth to Ghost's gash, the fabric soaking up crimson with slow, deliberate dabs, her voice a murmur of reassurances lost in the hush. "Easy now." She breathed, her skepticism crumbling like old plaster eyes wide with the weight of revelations, the man's exile, the family's hidden magic all spilling out in the crisis's wake. Ghost whimpered softly, his head resting on Evie's lap, body limp but alive, his silvery fur matted and dull under the lantern's soft glow. The broken snow globe lay nearby, shards glinting like fallen stars. Its magic ebbed but not extinguished, fragments of visions flickering faintly before dying out. Evie stirred her fingers, twitching in Ghost's fur, a quiet sob escaping as pain and relief intertwined the space, allowing for decompression, minimal movements, long pauses between breaths, sentences unfinished and hanging like mist. Aunt May wrapped a bandage around Ghost's flank, her touch lingering the barn's rafters, creaking in sympathy, a peaceful atmosphere settling like fresh snow over chaos. No rush, no words needed, just the slow unwind of survival, Evie's eyes meeting Aunt May's in silent acknowledgement, the fragile return to safety woven in soft gestures and shared silences. Days blurred into a steady rhythm in the estate's attic sunlight, filtering through the window in golden shafts that danced across the floorboards, warming the space like a gentle embrace, the air scented with lavender from a fresh sachet Aunt May had placed on the shelf. Evie and Ghost shared the quiet haven, their healing a tapestry of small, repeated actions, Evie rising each morning to fetch water, her steps soft and measured, placing the bowl before Ghost, who lapped slowly, his tongue rough against the liquid eyes, lifting to meet hers in grateful acknowledgement. She told him stories, whispers of her mother's adventures, voice steady but laced with emotion, her hand stroking his fur in rhythmic patterns that mirrored the rise and fall of his breaths, the silvery strands regaining their luster as his wound knit under Aunt May's careful tending. Ghost in turn followed her with devoted eyes, lying close during naps, his warmth seeping into her side like a balm against lingering chills, his presence a silent mirror to her recovery, both flinching at sudden noises, but relaxing in tandem, their behaviors interwoven like threads in a quilt. Aunt May joined them, often sharing a faded photo album, pages turning with a soft rustle revealing images of Evie's mother with a young Ghost, her fingers tracing the edges as stories flowed, emotion welling in her eyes. She loved him like family. The snow-draped town stretched before them like a canvas of quiet rebirth flakes falling in lazy spirals that caught the morning light, turning the world into a living snow globe where paths wound like veins of possibility. Evie stepped out from the estate's door, her boots crunching softly on the powdered ground, hand hovering near Ghost's shoulder, their breaths mingling in visible puffs that danced upward like shared secrets. "Ghost," she called gently, the name an invocation laced with newfound certainty, her voice steady yet tender eyes locking onto his, with a depth that mirrored their intertwined fates. He turned ancient gaze softening, and in a single unexpected motion rested his head against her leg, the weight warm and solid fur brushing her fingers like a promise fulfilled. No words passed, but the gesture spoke volumes. His lean into her touch, the subtle wag of his tail sweeping snow in arcs, breath syncing with hers in rhythmic harmony. Evie's heart swelled, a release washing over her like melting ice tears, pricking but not falling. The motion intimate, her hand descending to rest on his head, fingers curling into the silvery strands, a circle closed. The snow globe repaired and tucked in her pocket glowed faintly one last time, projecting a holographic whisper of her mother's smiling hand on Ghost's flank, marking the dissolution of fear and the dawn of legacy. Side by side, they walked steps in unison through the pristine white, the town awakening around them, birds chirping distant laughter, but their focus inward on the breath, the touch, the quiet triumph of trust reborn.